So I'm going to be talking about Breaking Bad, the 4th season.
I see lots of garlic there. That's your plate, right?
James, I guess, is going to talk about this book. He already went through it, but
yeah,
we
I just
haven't
started
went
it
through
today. Well, sometimes I
videos
believe in
entirely
doing.
yet.
Well, we just started.
We just started the Great Course, and he read the whole book.
Well, it's quite short.
Okay.
And it's relatively sweet in a certain way. So
we'll talk about Breaking Bad first.
Sure,
yeah?
Go for it. Yeah.
Okay. So, in this season of Breaking Bad, you really get a sense of who Walter White really is. Mm-hmm. And you also get a sense of how frail, really, what's his name is?
Jesse Bruce Pinkman. I think that's his full name.
I can't remember.
And I think it's Walter Hartwell White is the name of the other protagonist.
Okay. But anyhow, so I don't want to give away everything with the 4th season, but
be a tough thing to do. A full TV season is a lot of material.
Mm-hmm. But as Walter had slipped up in the past when he was drugged up, ready for surgery, or whatever that was in the hospital, when he was under the influence of prescription medication, he was at one point in this, he had taken his prescription medication, which he hadn't. And Walter is he's OCD. He's very obviously OCD, and it's what makes him such a genius, honestly. He's very
meticulous
about chemistry, and
about lots of things.
About everything, about his whole life. Everything is planned out. He has a very impressive prefrontal cortex.
Except when it comes to Jesse, you just wonder what that is like.
Yeah, but at one point when he was first meeting with Gus asked him, why Jesse, sort of thing, and Walter said, because Jesse does what I tell him to, and to a large extent,
make a big fuss before he does one.
And he gets into a lot of trouble that Walter has to bail him out of, but I don't know that Walter minds that. I think he likes the excitement.
Maybe.
And Jesse does do what he's told because Jesse is amiable, and Walter is a mix between blue and red. And you may think, oh no, only blue. No, very much blue, red.
Yeah, I think some people would feel sympathy for him because he got into the drug stuff, from what I could tell, to save his life.
Not entirely, though.
Well, that's what I'm saying.
I'm saying that he got into it not to save his life, but because he didn't have anything to lose anymore. So sometimes when people are dying, they decide, that's it, I'm going to do a whole bunch of risky things or whatever. And all the things that maybe I wanted to do, like buy a fancy red sports car and do donuts in a parking lot and then set it on fire.
Or hang with a crazy guy like Jesse.
Yeah. But at one point, what I was going to say earlier is Walt White had slipped up at one point when he was on prescription drugs, which he does not slip up. He doesn't. He's very careful about what he does, what he plans, what the world he plans around him, which involves planning for other people. But he slipped up while he was on medication, and he, when his wife had asked him if he remembered to bring his cell phone, he said, which one?
Which one?
And so she knew that he did in fact have more than one cell phone. And then in this season, she had. And when I first watched this season, I couldn't stand his wife. I was thinking, well, I still think, why in the world did they ever get married? What did they see in each other? But sometimes when people are young, well, she is.
He is not a nice person.
Exactly. And he keeps a lot of secrets, and he lies to her constantly. And even when she said, if we're going to go on, we have to be completely honest with each other, and still they were lying to each other. It's
and
never
when he
was
was honest with her, she was saying, we can't go on, right?
Well, that's true.
So.
But I don't know. I see things a little bit differently now, and I don't see him as being like, I understand where he's coming from, and the story is very believable up to this point. This is like with once after the 4th season, it's really a different show. The story has changed. This is all up until this point, until the end of the 4th season. It's all been leading up to this one point. And then now it goes on in a different, I mean, it goes on from here, right? And I guess you could say, well, this is always where it was going to go. But for the people watching, we don't know that until right now, until the end of the 4th season. You watch that and you wonder how far back had he planned all this, because you know he had. You know, some of the things that he planned, he was suggesting were Gus's anyway. And then, so you wonder, okay, well, how far back did it go? Like, based on the plant that they show in his backyard at the end of the season, you know that he did this. And plus, he said, I won. What, like, his wife right away, she's like, did you do this? And you know, what just happened? And he said, I won, or whatever, right? And so you knew this was the whole, anyway. But at one point he's under the influence of prescription medication because he'd gotten into a fight and decided to take some medication, and it wasn't, he felt badly about that. He felt embarrassed that his son saw him in that state. But he, when he asked his son about the car, his wife had got the son a car, and it wasn't what the son wanted, and it wasn't what the husband had wanted to pick out for his son. You know, it was all the wife, and she was just busy spending all of his money. She literally spent it all. Even though she was, you know, calling him down for how he earned it and everything, and then, but anyway, when he's under the influence, he doesn't call his son Flynn or Walt Jr., and you should be listening for it. It's interesting. So you get to know really what Walter's whole plan was in this, and you get to learn a bit more about how Walter, when he was 6, his dad died, so he was raised without a father, and boys don't tend to do well when they're raised without a father.
On average.
So
trying to be more violent than they would be apparently otherwise.
So anyway, you get to learn more about these characters and their motivations and stuff like that, and where it all, that there was a lot of planning involved that you weren't even aware of until the end of the season, and then the truth is right out there. So I'd recommend this season. What do you say about season 4?
Mm-hmm.
Yep. All 3
Better
that
than
I've
most
reviewed
other
here.
TV.
Exactly. So anyhow, you wanted to talk about money management.
Yeah, I wanted to make a point from
Okay.
Breaking Bad.
You do that.
So I was saying, one of his motivations. I think you know, it's easy to read it. That makes his most important motivation. Mm-hmm. You read it otherwise, but it's to save his life, and to, you know, he dedicated to the family, saving his life for his family.
I don't know that he was.
Oh yeah.
That's what he was claiming. But he
What
does.
I'm saying,
Now
all
he
I said
seems like he's going to live, and he's.
It's possible to read it.
It is possible.
Okay?
Yeah.
That's all I'm saying.
Okay.
I'm not saying I read. And I'm afraid a person reads it that way. They might be saying, this is why lower class people get into
yes.
crime.
Yeah, you're right. So people might be using it to kind of justify. And some people might be watching the show thinking, well, that these guys are big heroes or something.
Hard to say.
You never know.
And I just want to address that. When I went through my first stem cell therapy, they were saying, we can give you something to possibly extend your remission if you do get a remission. And no guarantee, of course, but it would be maybe substantial. It wasn't covered by Medicare back then. That was 2000. At the end of 2011. And it since was taken over by Medicare, or covered by Medicare. And so after my second stem cell therapy, it was covered. So I was able to take it. And my second remission, well, it's still going. It lasted longer than the first one. My understanding is it's relatively rare for cancer. And so, this stuff does seem to work on average. Seems to work for me.
Yeah.
Seems to be still working.
But you didn't go out and buy drugs so that you could get the drug.
Well, let me just clarify why I couldn't take it for after the first stem cell therapy. I did get a remission, couldn't extend it. Why? We were asking, how much does it cost? $50,000 a year. $50,000 a year. And, it was kind of like a matter, hey, how much is your life worth? No. I only realized it in the context of Walt White and the cancer. It wasn't as though I was saying to Pauline, man, oh man, should I go out and start
a meth lab?
Yeah. It never occurred to me. It was just, it doesn't work out, I'm going to die, you know? People, if they're in trouble, they don't have to do really bad things, they can just die. And, it's a bad situation and all that sort of stuff. But particularly when people are doing really bad things to other people.
Yeah.
If
like
they're doing
risking their
violence
lives
and stuff
or
like
killing
that,
children so that they can...
That's on them.
Yeah.
I don't care if they're lower class. If they're going to do... stuff that's against the law, if they're doing violence, I have no sympathy for them. They should go to jail for long prison terms. So, like I said, it never even occurred to me. It just only occurred to me just the other day. Hey, I didn't do that. And, I'd never think about, even though I thought about it, about an abstract, like if they tell me, hey, Revlimid is off it's off Blue Cross now, it's not covered. I won't be sitting there, oh man, I've got Walt White's, and now it's up minimum $84,000 a year. If it's not covered by Blue Cross. I wouldn't be sitting there thinking, well, I work for Walt White, now that I thought of it, I'm going to do it. No. So, yeah, that little argument, I have no truck with. I mean, if people want to do little embezzlements from big corporations and stuff like that, I'm not encouraging people to do it, but I have some degree of sympathy for it.
No, and you see also, we were talking about the women that, on the CBC, that were talking about wanting to have it all, having the child and the meaningful job at the same time, and this and that. It's like, well, if you're not caring for your child, who is? And what kind of care can you possibly expect from them? It's not their child. So, I mean, they should have. Why should you expect to be able to exploit other people to do the things that you don't want to do in your life, so that you can do more of the fun parts or whatever? It's ridiculous. And so you see, in Breaking Bad, there's a whole bunch of seriously damaged children that have grown up. They're now adult-sized children, all filling Jesse's house, and Jesse's just supplying them with more and more drugs to keep the party going, you know? And is that what we really want? Do we want to keep breeding more of either seriously damaged people who will go along with things, you know, and say, well, you know, if Walt White says that this has to happen, I guess this has to happen. That person had to die or whatever. And they'll just go along with that. Or people like Jesse, really, they're just being used. And all of the people that were in his house, they're just being exploited, really. And they'll go ahead and exploit others to get, you know, to feed their addictions. But really, it's people like Gus, or people like, what's her name, who had that, still has, I don't know, the injection site, whatever.
You mean here in town?
Yeah. Who was
What is the name of her?
paying herself and the other big honchos huge
Taking
amounts of
huge
coins
junkets
so that
to
they could,
Europe, shameful person.
yeah, it's ridiculous. So
Tons of overtime.
or we've been hearing on the CBC lately a lot about the We organization and how I guess the various people had volunteered for them or worked for very low wages and were totally exploited, you know. And at the same time, the We organization is paying celebrities richly to just make appearances for marketing purposes, you know. And it's ridiculous. Whether it's a paid organization or like for profit or not for profit, exploitation of people, it's wrong, and it needs to stop. And it's the amiables who get exploited more than any of the other personality types, and it's not fair. It's not right, and it needs to stop. So you were going to talk about money management, yeah?
Or what this guy thinks is money management.
Okay.
So, it's a great course. It's not as great as lots of other courses, from what I can tell. From the book, and the 2 or so installments of the show we actually looked at. So it's money management skills. The professor actually is a professor. The lecturer is a professor. Professor Michael Finka, and he actually says it properly, Finka. Of course, he's of German ancestry. He's professor of personal finance planning and director of the retirement planning and living consortium at Texas Tech University. He holds doctoral degrees in 2 things. It's unusual for a professor. Consumer science from Ohio State University, not the most prestigious place in the world, and in finance from the University of Missouri, again, not the most prestigious, but he's got 2 of them. He's authored a number of award-winning research articles, frequently speaks at industry and academic conferences on advanced financial planning topics. While speaking to industry about it, we won't hold that against them. I don't believe we should. So he's an expert in personal finance issues and appeared in the national press, including the Wall Street Journal. We won't hold that against him. The New York Times, we won't hold that against him. I'd be much more inclined to hold appearing in the Wall Street Journal against him. And Kiplinger's personal finance. So You know, like we'll be talking more about this when Pauline reviews. You'll review it when we finish watching it, and I think I'll have a few things to say, so long as Pauline's still going to put up with whatever I'm
Definitely.
doing about it. So, understanding your financial brain. So, you saw that a little bit. What did you think of that?
I thought it was
I
good.
thought it was actually
Yeah.
helpful there. You know, like the way I've put it when it comes to political things is people want to go with their hearts instead of their heads. The way he puts it, and this is better. You know, there's a part of your head that is has to do with planning and
Yeah.
hooked into the
He was
future.
basically saying is that we're wired to be of two minds about
Yeah,
things.
exactly right. And it's not right and left hemisphere. The
Yeah.
one they claim is more
Limbic
primitive.
and-
it's the limbic and
Yeah.
what is that?
Prefrontal
The prefrontal
cortex
cortex.
is the-
Exactly right. Is
The planning for the
planning.
future and stuff
The
like
limbic
that.
one is a reacting thing, and
Mhm.
you know they say it's more primitive. It's in the more animals with smaller brains and stuff like that. Animals have to survive, so do humans. There are times when you're confronted with a crisis, you better be ready to react quickly. You know, like if you're in a crosswalk and someone's hammering down on you in a vehicle, you better be ready to jump and not be sitting there thinking, do I? Don't I? What do I do here? You know? That'll get you dead pretty quickly. But, you know, if you don't plan very well, you could end up pretty dead pretty slowly. You know? So there are a lot of limbics, shall we call them, in Germany in the 30s. Took them a while, but so they were reacting. You know, they believed in action. They're kind of like the direct action people who make up maybe 50% of the anarchists out there. I just want to do what my gut tells me to do. Yeah, you know, I'm not impressed. You guys will end up getting yourself killed, and a lot of lower class people killed, and a lot of people of color killed, and all sorts of stuff, just for your little whims, your little limbic whims. I thought that analysis was pretty good. You know, he's basically saying, if you're investing, you'd better not be reacting. You'd better, no.
Sleep on it.
Now with money, Pauline and I don't have to think about those kind of things because we just,
Well, we don't have enough of it to really.
well, I had a lot of money back in the day.
Oh, I
spent
didn't even
more-
ask you if you wanted that.
Oh, sure, exactly. I spent more freely than
11
Pauline
years.
did, but that's not to say I spent freely. Just to say
Well,
more or something doesn't mean it is something. Like, you know, like calculus is more easy than real analysis, shall we say. Neither is terribly easy. So that's an example. So what else? Managing money and life cycle theory. I got a problem with life cycle theory. He's saying you should basically save when you're like in your middle years, and then kind of like spend that in your older years, and you should borrow in your younger years. He's writing for Americans, and I do. If you've got a plan for a career that requires some sort of advanced education, you probably have to be ready to borrow. But
Yes.
I don't recommend borrowing
No.
unless you absolutely have to. I don't care what age you're at. Go ahead.
I mean, he says that people that have, what did he say, 2 years of college make $100,000 more. I can't remember. What
It might
was.
be. It's on average, it's a significant difference.
Yeah.
But you'd better get educated. You know, like I don't recommend borrowing a lot of money and getting an arts degree, unless
No.
you're going to be a commercial artist, or unless you're going to be a Picasso. Think you're going to live on that. You know what I'm
Yeah.
saying? So I don't recommend borrowing for or a humanities degree. You'd better have a job where you can get close to what, because you're not going to earn money to make up for what you're borrowing.
Yeah.
The big problem with this life cycle theory about borrowing is he says, if you got to borrow for education, well, that's good. Here's what sophisticated financial advisors, I think they're sophisticated, say it's okay to borrow for an investment, but not to consume. Borrowing to buy a house, is that an investment or consumption? What do you think?
You know, it should be an investment, but it wouldn't necessarily always be.
It wouldn't necessarily
So
be. You know, like you don't want to borrow $1 million to get something with a huge view and all that sort of stuff.
Right on
You
the
want
fault line.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
or even just with a huge view, something that you don't need
Yeah.
and that you can't pay back, right?
Yeah, or a place like you could buy a house that's nowhere near employment. Well, how are you going to pay that back or whatever?
And you raised the most important point. You don't want to invest in something that's going to go kaput. But it is an investment. How about for education?
It can be. I mean,
It might be
for
a bad
my-
investment,
The
right?
first, when I put the money into horticulture, the first 2 years, I made that back no problem. But I was young at the time, and easier to find employment, perhaps, whatever. But the 4 years I put into university, I didn't make anything back from that. So,
There you go.
yeah.
Still, I consider it an investment, just maybe not the best investment.
No, it was, I mean, investment in terms of, I'm certainly a more learned individual member of society, right? So, and I mean, this goes in with just, I'm more confident about actually being able to learn. Like when I went into university, before that point, I didn't think I was university material. I had a really low self-esteem about that.
That's
And-
right before you started university.
Yep, and
Well, there you go. Because I was going to say,
wasn't doing anything that
Since-
was really much interest to me or whatever. I was doing things that I thought would make me more interesting to you, and things that I thought my dad would have liked to do, because at the time my dad was dying, and I wanted to do something that would interest him, that he would think, oh, I'm glad that Pauline's doing that, because I would have liked for her to do that.
so what I was going to say, I guess I'm agreeing with you. Since I've known you, I've noticed that your confidence levels are way higher than they were.
So
at the
it
beginning.
has benefited me. That it's certainly benefited me that I went to university. But I mean, as far as being able to pay back, like I didn't take out a loan for that or anything, because I'd already saved up the money.
Very smart.
And I had expected that I would make the money back quickly, which was a silly thought, I suppose, but the job should have been available, and what I was taking was actually quite sensible, and I just didn't come across them. So now perhaps I could have been more proactive and went to employers directly and introduced myself, but I didn't.
Yeah.
So,
Anyway, how about buying a car?
well, that's
Investment
not an
or
investment.
consumption? It's consumption.
Yes.
And this guy
But-
doesn't make it clear.
No.
He does not make it clear. That's a real miss. So this course is not as great as almost every other great course we've dealt with.
Yeah.
That's a huge miss.
But at the same time, if you can write off the vehicle for a business expense, then it may not be an awful decision.
Yeah.
But
How about borrowing money? Food's important. How about borrowing money so you can weekly, every day, let's say every evening, go to a restaurant? What is that? Consumption or investment?
well, the thing is